Have you ever wondered what could unravel a narcissist, that towering figure of self-assured grandiosity, whose mask of invincibility seems impenetrable? Picture a narcissist, their ego, a polished fortress, reflecting only their chosen light, deflecting all critique. Now imagine an empath, not the soft-hearted caricature often painted, but one who has dared to peer into the abyss of their own shadow, a figure who carries the weight of their own darkness with unflinching clarity. This empath, awake to their own hidden wounds, becomes a mirror the narcissist cannot escape, a force that threatens to shatter their carefully curated illusion. In the interplay of these two archetypes, a profound psychological drama unfolds, one that Carl Jung would have recognized as a clash between the ego's projection and the soul's relentless call toward wholeness. The narcissist, in Jungian terms, is a prisoner of their persona, that outward mask crafted to seduce the world into adoration. Their ego, swollen with the need for validation, feeds on the collective unconscious's archetypes of power and control. Yet it remains brittle, for it is built on denial. Beneath their bravado lies the shadow, the unacknowledged insecurities, the suppressed shame, the fragility they dare not face. This shadow, Jung taught, is not merely a flaw, but a vital part of the self, the raw material of individuation. The narcissist, however, projects this shadow outward, casting their flaws onto others, blaming the world for their unrest. To them, vulnerability is a specter to be banished, a threat to the godlike image they worship within themselves. Their relationships become stages for this projection, where others are mere props in the drama of their selfhood. Enter the empath not as a passive vessel of feeling, but as a figure who has walked the perilous path of shadow work. This empath has confronted their own darkness, their tendencies towards self-sacrifice, their hunger for approval, their quiet resentments. Through this descent, they have begun to integrate what Jung called the shadow, that repository of all the self rejects. This integration does not make them perfect, but awake, capable of seeing not only their own depths, but the hidden truths in others. When this empath stands before a narcissist, their gaze pierces the persona's sheen. They see the narcissist's shadow, not with judgment, but with a quiet, unnerving recognition. This is the terror an empath who sees their own shadow cannot be manipulated by the narcissist's projections. They cannot be gaslit into doubting their reality, for they have already wrestled with their own. Consider the dynamic. The narcissist thrives on control-weaving narratives that bend others to their will. They project their insecurities, accusing others of the very flaws they refuse to see in themselves. The empath, however, having faced their own shadow, refuses to absorb these projections. They stand firm, a mirror reflecting the narcissist's disowned truths back at them. This is not a battle of words, but a silent psychological reckoning. The narcissist's charm, their rage, their victimhood, all their tools of manipulation lose their potency. The empath's self-awareness becomes a kind of alchemy, transmuting the narcissist's illusions into a confrontation with reality. And what is that reality? That the narcissist's grandiosity is a fragile defense against a deeper wound, a wound they have spent a lifetime fleeing. You watching this might feel a stirring within. Have you ever encountered someone whose need for control left you doubting your own truth? Or perhaps you've sensed your own shadow lurking in moments of resentment or self-doubt, whispering truths you'd rather ignore. This is the Jungian path to face what lies beneath, to embrace the discomfort of self-knowing. The empath who has done this work does not merely resist the narcissist, they unsettle them. Their very presence, grounded in authenticity, exposes the narcissist's illusion of superiority. It is not cruelty, but clarity that terrifies, a clarity born of the empath's willingness to see themselves, whole, shadow and all. In the collective unconscious, where archetypes dance, the narcissist and the empath are not mere individuals, but forces, reflections of humanity's eternal struggle between ego and soul. The narcissist clings to the ego's illusion, while the empath, through shadow work, begins to touch the soul's truth. Yet this is not a simple tale of good versus evil. Both carry wounds. Both are human. The narcissist's terror arises not from the empath's strength, but from the mirror they hold, a mirror that invites, however painfully, the possibility of transformation. For in Jung's vision, the shadow is not an enemy, but a guide beckoning toward individuation, toward the self that is whole. The dance between the narcissist and the empath who sees their own shadow is not merely a clash of personalities, but a profound psychological encounter, a collision of archetypes that reverberates through the depths of the collective unconscious. The narcissist, enthroned in their persona, wields their grandiosity like a shield, deflecting any hint of vulnerability that might expose the fragility beneath. Their world is a stage where every interaction serves to affirm their constructed self, a self that demands constant adoration to drown out the whispers of their unacknowledged shadow. Yet in the presence of an empath who has ventured into their own darkness, this carefully orchestrated performance begins to falter. The empath's clarity, forged in the crucible of self-awareness, becomes a silent force that disrupts the narcissist's control, not through confrontation, but through the simple act of seeing. This seeing is the heart of the empath's power. Having faced their own shadow, their fears of inadequacy, their unspoken anger, their moments of self-betrayal, they have begun to integrate the fragmented pieces of their psyche. Jung taught that this integration is the path to individuation, the lifelong journey toward wholeness. The empath, through this work, has learned to hold their contradictions without shame, to embrace the messy humanity of their soul. This acceptance grants them a kind of psychological immunity to the narcissist's tactics. Where the narcissist seeks to project their insecurities, accusing others of selfishness or weakness, the empath does not flinch. They recognize these projections not as truths, but as echoes of the narcissist's disowned pain, a pain they themselves have learned to cradle rather than cast away. Imagine yourself in such a moment, standing before someone whose words twist reality, whose charm or rage seeks to pull you into their narrative. Have you felt the tug to doubt yourself, to shrink under their gaze? Yet what if you the empath could stand rooted in your own truth, seeing not only their mask, but the wounded self beneath it. This is the terror the narcissist feels, not of judgment, but of being truly seen. The empath's gaze, softened by their own shadow work, does not condemn but reveals. It holds up a mirror to the narcissist's hidden shame, their fear of insignificance, their desperate need for control. In that reflection, the narcissist glimpses the possibility of their own vulnerability, a possibility they have spent a lifetime denying. This dynamic is not without its pain. The empath, though grounded, is not immune to the narcissist's pull. Their sensitivity, their attunement to others' emotions, can make the narcissist's projections feel like daggers. Yet their shadow work gives them a shield, not of cold detachment, but of compassionate clarity. They see the narcissist's behavior as a defense, a frantic attempt to protect a fragile ego from collapse. Attachment theory illuminates this further. The narcissist's grandiosity often masks an insecure attachment, a childhood wound where love was conditional, forcing them to build a self that demands constant validation. The empath, aware of their own attachment wounds, perhaps a tendency to please or to lose themselves in others, can recognize this pattern without being consumed by it. In the Jungian framework, this encounter is a call to both parties, a moment where the collective unconscious stirs. The narcissist, though terrified, is offered a fleeting chance at transformation, an invitation to face their shadow. Few take it, for the ego's grip is fierce, and the path of individuation is arduous. But the empath, by their very existence, plants a seed, a possibility that the narcissist might one day turn inward. For the empath, the encounter is a test of their own growth, a chance to hold their boundaries without losing their compassion. It is a delicate balance, for to see the narcissist's shadow without being drawn into their drama requires a strength born of self-knowing. You might pause here, reflecting on your own encounters with those who seek to control or diminish. Do you see your own shadow in those moments? Your need to be liked, your fear of conflict? The empath's path is not one of perfection, but of courage, of choosing to face the discomfort of truth over the comfort of illusion. In this clash of archetypes, the narcissist's terror is not the empath's victory, but a shared human tragedy, a reminder that we all, in our own ways, flee from the shadows we must one day embrace. The empath, by seeing their own, becomes a beacon, not of superiority, but of what it means to be whole. The empath's gaze, honed by shadow work, pierces the narcissist's carefully constructed world, not with malice, but with an unrelenting clarity that stirs the depths of the psyche. This is no ordinary confrontation, but a meeting of archetypes in the theater of the soul, where the narcissist's persona, polished, commanding, untouchable, begins to crack under the weight of being truly seen. The empath, having wrestled with their own shadow, carries a presence that disrupts the narcissist's illusion, not through words, but through the quiet power of authenticity. This authenticity, born of the empath's journey toward individuation, becomes a mirror the narcissist cannot charm, manipulate, or evade. It reflects not just their grandiosity, but the hidden fragility they have buried beneath layers of denial, a fragility that Jung would recognize as the shadow's cry for acknowledgement. The narcissist's terror lies in this reflection. Their ego, so dependent on external validation, thrives on controlling the narrative, shaping how others perceive them. They project their insecurities outward, casting blame, crafting stories where they are always the hero or the victim. Yet the empath, grounded in their own self-awareness, refuses to play this role. They see the narcissist's projections for what they are: not truths, but defenses against a deeper wound. This wound, often rooted in early experiences of rejection or conditional love, has shaped the narcissist's need to dominate, to be seen as infallible. Attachment theory sheds light here. The narcissist's grandiosity is a shield against an insecure core, a self built to survive a world where love was scarce or unpredictable. The empath, having faced their own attachment wounds, perhaps a tendency to overgive or seek approval, recognizes this pattern without being ensnared by it. This recognition is not a weapon, but a quiet revolution. The empath's strength lies not in attacking the narcissist, but in refusing to collude with their illusion. They hold space for the truth, a truth that includes the narcissist's humanity, their pain, their fear, their unacknowledged longing for connection. This is what terrifies the narcissist most, not criticism, but compassion that sees through their mask. For in that compassion lies an invitation to face their shadow, to step off the pedestal of their ego, and into the messy, vulnerable work of becoming whole. Jung taught that the shadow is not merely a repository of flaws, but a gateway to the self, a guide toward individuation. Yet for the narcissist, this path feels like annihilation, for their identity is tethered to the illusion of perfection. You, standing in the echoes of this dynamic, might feel a resonance in your own heart. Have you ever faced someone whose need for control left you questioning your own reality? Or perhaps you've glimpsed your own shadow in moments of pride or avoidance, those fleeting truths you'd rather not name. The empath's path is not one of moral superiority, but of courage, of choosing to sit with discomfort rather than flee it. In the presence of the narcissist, the empath's self-awareness becomes a kind of alchemy, transforming the dynamic from one of power and control to one of possibility. They do not seek to destroy the narcissist, but to reflect back the potential for transformation, however unlikely it may be embraced. In the collective unconscious, this encounter is a mythic drama, a clash between the ego's fortress and the soul's quiet insistence on truth. The narcissist, trapped in their persona, represents the human temptation to cling to illusion, to prioritize image over essence. The empath, through their shadow work, embodies the harder path of integration, where light and dark are held together in a fragile human whole. Yet this is not a simple dichotomy of good and evil. Both are wounded. Both are human. The narcissist's terror is not just their own, but a universal one, a fear of facing what lies beneath the masks we all wear to survive. The empath's gift is not perfection, but presence, a willingness to stand in the truth of their own imperfection and extend that understanding to another. This dynamic ripples outward, touching not just the two but the world around them. The empath's clarity, their refusal to be drawn into the narcissist's drama, becomes a quiet rebellion against a culture that often rewards grandiosity over authenticity. It invites you too to consider what shadows do you avoid and what might happen if you turn toward them. The empath's power lies not in defeating the narcissist, but in illuminating a path toward wholeness, a path that requires courage, humility, and the willingness to see. The encounter between the narcissist and the empath who sees their own shadow unfolds like a silent storm, a psychological reckoning that stirs the depths of both souls. The narcissist, armored in their persona, clings to the illusion of invincibility, their ego a fortress built to keep the shadow at bay. Every interaction is a performance, a carefully orchestrated bid to maintain control, to ensure the world reflects back their chosen image. Yet the empath, tempered by their own descent into darkness, stands as a disruptor, not through force, but through the quiet power of their integrated self. Their eyes, awake to their own flaws and wounds, see through the narcissist's mask, not to expose, but to reveal the humanity beneath. This revelation is the narcissist's deepest fear, for it threatens the very foundation of their constructed identity. In Jung's framework, the shadow is not merely a collection of repressed flaws, but a vital force, a reservoir of untapped potential that beckons toward individuation. The narcissist, however, perceives this shadow as a threat, a specter of weakness that must be banished at all costs. They project their insecurities outward, accusing others of the envy, inadequacy, or betrayal they cannot face within themselves. This projection is their shield, a defense against the vulnerability that lurks in their unconscious. Yet the empath, having walked the path of shadow work, does not absorb these projections. They recognize them as fragments of the narcissist's disowned self, echoes of a pain they have learned to hold in their own heart. This recognition disarms the narcissist's tactics, for the empath's clarity cannot be manipulated or swayed. Picture yourself in this dance. Have you ever felt the weight of someone's expectations, their need to bend you to their narrative? Or perhaps you've sensed your own shadow stirring those moments of pride, fear, or shame you'd rather keep hidden. The empath's strength lies in their willingness to face these truths, to embrace the discomfort of their own humanity. This embrace grants them a kind of psychological sovereignty, a rootedness that the narcissist's projections cannot uproot. They do not need to fight or flee. They simply stand their presence, a mirror that reflects the narcissist's shadow back to them. This mirror does not judge, but invites, offering a glimpse of what could be if the narcissist dared to turn inward. This dynamic is not without its cost. The empath, attuned to the emotional undercurrents of others, feels the narcissist's pain as keenly as their own. Their sensitivity, a gift and a burden, makes the narcissist's rage or manipulation a visceral experience. Yet their shadow work gives them a compass, a way to navigate this storm without losing themselves. They see the narcissist's behavior as a symptom of a deeper wound, often rooted in early experiences of abandonment or conditional love. Attachment theory reveals the narcissist's grandiosity as a fragile defense, a way to mask the fear that they are not enough. The empath, aware of their own tendencies, perhaps to overextend or seek validation, can hold this truth without being consumed by it. Their compassion is not blind, but discerning, born of a hard-won understanding of human frailty. In the collective unconscious, this encounter is a mythic struggle, a clash between the ego's illusion and the soul's call to truth. The narcissist embodies the human temptation to cling to control, to prioritize image over essence. The empath, through their integration of light and dark, represents the possibility of wholeness, a self that does not shy away from its own contradictions. Yet this is not a battle of heroes and villains. Both carry wounds. Both are bound by the human condition. The narcissist's terror is a universal one, a fear of facing the shadow we all carry. The empath's presence, grounded in their own vulnerability, becomes a quiet challenge to this fear, not just for the narcissist, but for all who witness it. You might feel this resonance deep within. What shadows do you avoid, and what might it mean to meet them with courage? The empath's path is not one of triumph, but of humility, of choosing authenticity over illusion. Their encounter with the narcissist is a reminder that true power lies not in dominating others, but in knowing oneself. It is a call to step into the discomfort of your own depths, to see the shadows you cast, and to hold them with the same compassion you might offer another. In this act of seeing, the empath becomes a beacon, illuminating the possibility of a self that is whole, flawed, and profoundly human. The silent tension between the narcissist and the empath who sees their own shadow ripples through the psyche like a current stirring the archetypes that dwell in the collective unconscious. The narcissist, ensnared by their persona, clings to a self-image that must remain flawless, untouchable, a monument to their own perceived greatness. Their every word, every gesture, is a calculated act to maintain this illusion, to keep the shadow, their shame, their fear of insignificance at bay. Yet the empath, forged in the crucible of their own shadow work, stands as a quiet disruptor, their presence a mirror that reflects not just the narcissist's grandiosity, but the trembling vulnerability beneath. This reflection is not an attack, but a revelation, one that threatens to unravel the narcissist's carefully woven narrative. Jung taught that the shadow is not merely a flaw to be overcome, but a vital part of the self, a guide toward individuation, the journey to wholeness. The narcissist, however, perceives this shadow as an enemy, a threat to their constructed identity. They project their insecurities onto others, casting blame for the chaos they feel within. This projection is their armor, a defense against the truth they cannot face, that they too are human, fragile and in need of connection. The empath, having confronted their own shadow, their self-doubt, their need to please, their quiet resentments, does not bend under this projection. They see it for what it is, a cry from the narcissist's disowned self, a plea for recognition disguised as control. This clarity, born of the empath's own integration, becomes a force the narcissist cannot manipulate. Imagine yourself caught in this dynamic, facing someone whose words twist reality, whose need for dominance seeks to pull you into their orbit. Have you felt the urge to shrink, to appease, or to fight back? Yet what if you could stand like the empath, rooted in your own truth, seeing not just the mask, but the wounded soul behind it? This is the power of shadow work. It grants the empath a kind of psychological anchor, a steadiness that the narcissist's tactics cannot shake. They do not need to argue or accuse. Their mere presence, grounded in self-awareness, exposes the narcissist's illusion. This exposure is the source of the narcissist's terror, not of being judged, but of being seen in their raw, unfiltered humanity. This encounter is not without its weight. The empath's sensitivity, their attunement to the emotional currents of others, makes the narcissist's pain palpable. They feel the rage, the desperation, the unspoken longing that drives the narcissist's behavior. Yet their shadow work gives them a boundary, a way to hold this awareness without losing themselves. Attachment theory offers insight here. The narcissist's grandiosity often stems from an insecure attachment, a wound from a time when love was uncertain or withheld. The empath, aware of their own attachment patterns, perhaps a tendency to overgive or seek validation, can recognize this wound without being drawn into its drama. Their compassion is not a surrender, but a strength, a refusal to collude with the narcissist's illusion while still honoring their humanity. In the Jungian lens, this dynamic is a mythic dance, a clash between the ego's fortress and the soul's quiet insistence on truth. The narcissist represents the human temptation to cling to illusion, to prioritize control over connection. The empath, through their integration of light and dark, embodies the harder path of authenticity, where the self is embraced in all its contradictions. Yet this is not a story of good versus evil. Both are bound by the human condition. Both carry wounds that shape their dance. The narcissist's terror is a universal fear, a dread of facing the shadow that dwells in us all. The empath's presence, rooted in their own vulnerability, becomes a quiet invitation not just to the narcissist, but to all who witness it, to turn toward that shadow with courage. You might feel this stirring within you. What illusions do you cling to, and what might it mean to let them go? The empath's path is not one of perfection, but of presence, of choosing to see oneself clearly and extending that clarity to others. Their encounter with the narcissist is a reminder that true strength lies not in dominating or escaping, but in embracing the full spectrum of the self. It is a call to step into your own depths, to face the shadows you cast, and to hold them with the same compassion you might offer another. In this act of seeing, the empath becomes a light, not of judgment, but of possibility, illuminating the path toward a self that is whole. The interplay between the narcissist and the empath who sees their own shadow reaches its crescendo in the silent, unseen spaces of the psyche, where archetypes clash and the soul's truth presses against the ego's defenses. The narcissist, enthroned in their persona, wields their grandiosity like a scepter, commanding the world to affirm their invincibility. Their every action is a ritual to banish the shadow, their shame, their fear of being ordinary, their unacknowledged need for love. Yet the empath, tempered by their own descent into darkness, stands as a quiet sentinel, their presence a mirror that reflects not just the narcissist's polished facade, but the raw, trembling humanity beneath. This reflection, born of the empath's integration, is not a weapon, but a revelation, one that threatens to dissolve the narcissist's illusion into the stark light of truth. In Jung's vision, the shadow is not a flaw to be eradicated, but a sacred guide, a repository of all that the ego rejects, yet the soul requires for wholeness. The narcissist, however, perceives this shadow as a mortal threat, a crack in the monument of their selfhood. They project their insecurities outward, weaving narratives that cast others as the source of their unrest. This projection is their fortress, a defense against the vulnerability they cannot bear to face. But the empath, having confronted their own shadow, their self-sacrifice, their hidden resentments, their moments of doubt, does not bend to this manipulation. They see the narcissist's projections as fragments of a disowned self, cries of a wounded psyche masquerading as control. This clarity, forged in the empath's own individuation, becomes a force the narcissist cannot sway. Picture yourself in this moment, standing before someone whose need for dominance seeks to reshape your reality. Have you felt the pull to doubt your own truth, to shrink beneath their gaze? Yet what if you could stand like the empath, anchored in your own depths, seeing not just their mask, but the pain it conceals? This is the power of shadow work. It grants the empath a quiet sovereignty, a refusal to be drawn into the narcissist's drama. They do not need to fight or flee. Their presence alone, grounded in self-awareness, exposes the fragility of the narcissist's illusion. This exposure is the heart of the narcissist's terror, not of condemnation, but of being seen in their unguarded humanity, stripped of the persona they have clung to for survival. This dynamic carries a profound cost. The empath's sensitivity, their attunement to the emotional undercurrents of others, makes the narcissist's pain a visceral weight. They feel the rage, the desperation, the unspoken longing that fuels the narcissist's behavior. Yet their shadow work offers a shield, not of detachment, but of compassionate clarity. Attachment theory illuminates the narcissist's grandiosity as a defense against an insecure core, a wound from a time when love was conditional or absent. The empath, aware of their own attachment wounds, perhaps a tendency to lose themselves in others, can hold this truth without being consumed. Their compassion is not weakness, but a strength, a refusal to collude with the narcissist's illusion while still honoring their humanity. In the collective unconscious, this encounter is a mythic drama, a dance between the ego's illusion and the soul's call to wholeness. The narcissist embodies the human temptation to cling to control, to prioritize image over essence. The empath, through their integration of light and dark, represents the possibility of authenticity, a self that embraces its contradictions. Yet this is not a tale of heroes and villains. Both are wounded, Both are human, bound by the shared struggle to navigate the shadows within. The narcissist's terror is a universal fear, a dread of facing the truths we all carry. The empath's presence, rooted in their own vulnerability, becomes a quiet invitation, not just to the narcissist, but to all to turn toward those truths with courage. This is the culmination, a call to profound self-awareness, to the integration of the self in all its messy, beautiful complexity. The empath's gift is not in defeating the narcissist, but in illuminating a path toward wholeness for themselves and for others. They show us that to see one's shadow is not to be diminished, but to be made whole, to extend compassion not just to others, but to the self. In this act of seeing, of holding light and dark together, the empath becomes a beacon of what it means to be human. The individual who truly understands their depths extends that grace to the world.